The coffee cup sat empty on the table between us. Two hollow white porcelain circles that somehow felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. My mother and sister stared at me from across that scratched laminate surface at the rusty spoon, and I watched something I never thought I would see. Desperation. The same desperation that had lived in my bones for months was now reflected in their eyes, and I felt absolutely nothing. Eleanor tried to smile, but her lips trembled. The expensive perfume she always wore, the one that used to smell like power and untouchable elegance, now just smelled desperate, stale, like she had been wearing the same clothes for days. "Scarlett," she said, and hearing my real name from her mouth felt foreign. "You look so healthy." I set down the coffee pot I had been holding, my apron stained with grease from the morning rush. Behind me, the kitchen clattered with the sound of dishes being washed, the same dishes I had scrubbed with burned hands just months ago. Tiffany sat beside Eleanor, her silver dress from the charity gala replaced with a wrinkled sweater that had seen better days. She would not meet my eyes. "What do you want?" I asked, and my voice was steady. So steady it surprised even me. Tiffany's voice cracked when she finally spoke. "We're staying at a motel on the edge of town. It's terrible. Mom's not doing well, and we thought maybe you could help us. Just a little bit." Eleanor looked down at the table at those empty coffee cups, and I remembered another empty cup, the one I had drunk from on that frozen night when they left me at Beacon House with nothing but a trash bag full of my shame. But before I tell you how it ended, let me take you back to where it all began. If you are enjoying this story of betrayal and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories that will shock you. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now let me take you back to that night, the night that changed everything. It was 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of laughter. Not the kind of laughter that makes you smile, but the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. The kind that tells you something fundamental has shifted in the world, and you are on the wrong side of that shift. Eleanor stood at the foot of my bed, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness like a surgical blade, illuminating her face in harsh white light that made her look skeletal, inhuman. Behind her, I could make out Tiffany's silhouette in the doorway, arms crossed, one hip cocked in that way she did when she was about to say something cruel she thought was clever. "Wake up, sweetheart," Eleanor said, but there was no sweetness in it. Just something sharp and poisonous that reminded me of the way she used to talk about the neighbors, about the women at her book club, about anyone she considered beneath her. I had never thought I would be on the receiving end of that tone. I sat up, my heart already racing, though I did not understand why. The sheets were thin, threadbare really, and I remembered that detail so clearly. I had asked for new ones 6 months ago when these started tearing, but Eleanor said I should be grateful for what I had, that money did not grow on trees, that I needed to learn the value of things. Never mind that she had just bought Tiffany a complete bedroom set from that expensive furniture store downtown. I pulled the sheets up to my chest like they could protect me from whatever was coming from that look in Eleanor's eyes that I had never seen directed at me before. "Mom," I whispered, still clinging to that word like a lifeline, still hoping this was some kind of nightmare, some fever dream brought on by exhaustion. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "You're the surprise guest tonight," Eleanor said, and she moved closer, each step deliberate, measured like a predator approaching prey. She ripped the sheets from my hands, her blood-red nails flashing like knives in the harsh light. "You've overstayed your welcome, little girl. This is your checkout notice. Time to pack your bags and get out of my house." Tiffany laughed from the doorway, and it was a sound I had heard so many times before, but never directed at me with such cruelty, such absolute dismissal. We had laughed together countless times, shared secrets, shared clothes, shared a bathroom where we used to do our makeup together while talking about boys and dreams and futures. Now she looked at me like I was something unpleasant she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "Mom, don't baby her anymore. Everyone has their limits, right, Scarlett? Or should I say, Mia? Since that's what you'll be calling yourself soon enough. Just another charity case with a fake name." The way she said my name, like it was something dirty, something shameful, made my stomach turn. This was my sister. My younger sister, who I had helped with her homework every night for years, who I had covered for when she snuck out to meet boys. Mom would not approve of who I had lent money to when she overspent her allowance, who I had loved. Unconditionally, despite her selfishness, her casual cruelty to others, her ability to manipulate Mom into giving her whatever she wanted. I had always made excuses for her. She's young, she'll grow out of it, she doesn't really mean it. But looking at her face now, I realized she did mean it. She had always meant it. "Tiffany," I started, but I did not know how to finish. What do you say when betrayal wraps itself around your throat and squeezes? What do you say when someone you loved, someone you protected, someone you sacrificed for looks at you with such complete indifference? My voice came out strangled, weak, pathetic even to my own ears. Eleanor threw a black trash bag onto my bed. It landed with a hollow thump that seemed to echo in the small room that seemed to punctuate the end of something. Put your necessities in there, and I mean necessities. No dramatics. The valuable things stay here because you don't deserve them anymore. You never deserved them. I see that now. My hands shook as I stood up. The floor was cold under my bare feet, and I was wearing the same waitress uniform I had worn to work earlier that day, stained with coffee and ketchup and the grease from the fryer that never quite washed out. I had been too tired to change before collapsing into bed after my double shift. The rusty spoon paid minimum wage, and I gave most of it to Eleanor for rent, for food, for utilities, for the privilege of sleeping in this tiny room that used to be a storage closet that still smelled faintly of mothballs and old cardboard. My room, the only space I had in this house that had once been my father's house, my home before he died, and everything changed. I started gathering clothes, my movements mechanical, robotic, my brain refusing to process what was happening. A few pairs of jeans with holes in the knees that I had been meaning to patch. Some t-shirts that had faded from too many washes in the old machine in the basement. My spare uniform that smelled like industrial detergent and desperation. A sweater my father had given me the last Christmas before he died, the one thing I could not bear to leave behind. My hands found a photograph on the small shelf above the bed, a picture from 8 years ago when my father was still alive before the cancer, before the medical bills that Eleanor said had drained everything before the funeral where I cried, and Eleanor just looked annoyed that it was raining. We all looked happy in that photo. It was a lie, but it was my lie, my memory proof that I had once belonged somewhere. Eleanor saw me looking at it and stepped closer. She smelled like wine and that expensive perfume she ordered from France, and underneath it all, something sour, something rotten. "Don't even think about taking that garbage," she said, pointing at the photo with one blood-red nail. "Those memories aren't for people like you. They're for people who know how to maintain dignity, who know their place, who contribute something to this family, instead of being a constant drain on resources. People like me," I repeated, and I heard my voice crack, heard the little girl inside me who still wanted her mother's approval, who still believed that love was supposed to be unconditional. "I'm your daughter. Dad's daughter." This was his house. "You're a burden," Eleanor corrected, and the casual way she said it, like she was commenting on the weather or remarking on the price of milk, hurt more than if she had screamed it, more than if she had hit me. "You've always been a burden. From the day you were born, you've been nothing but work and worry and expense. Even your father knew it. Why do you think he put everything in my name before he died? He knew you would never amount to anything. He told me as much in the hospital. Said to make sure Tiffany was taken care of because she had potential. You were just the mistake that came first." That was a lie. I knew it was a lie. My father had loved me. He had called me his little scholar, had been so proud when I got into college, had promised to help me pay for it. He had died suddenly, unexpectedly, 3 weeks before my freshman year was supposed to start, a heart attack in his sleep. The doctors said he probably did not feel any pain. I had felt enough pain for both of us. Eleanor had been crying at the funeral, had seemed devastated, had held me while I sobbed. Looking back now, I wondered if any of it had been real. Had she been crying for him or for herself? Had she held me out of love or obligation? After the funeral, Eleanor had explained that there were complications with the estate, that everything was tied up in the business, that the medical bills had been astronomical, that we needed to be careful with money. She sold the business my father had spent 20 years building, sold it quickly to the first buyer who made an offer. She said it was necessary, that she could not run it alone, that I was too young and inexperienced to help. The money from the sale was supposed to be invested for our future, for my education, for Tiffany's education, for our security. But my college fund never materialized. Eleanor said there were complications, lawyer fees, taxes, things I would not understand. She said I should be grateful that she was letting me live at home rent-free. Except it was not rent-free. I paid in other ways. I paid by giving her my paychecks from my after-school jobs. I paid by taking care of the house, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. I paid by watching Tiffany when Eleanor wanted to go out. I paid by giving up my college dreams and taking classes at the community college instead, classes I could barely afford and barely had time to attend because I was working 2 jobs. I paid by becoming invisible, by making myself smaller and smaller until I was just a ghost haunting my own life. I stuffed the clothes into the trash bag, each item feeling like a piece of myself being discarded, being thrown away like garbage. When I was done, the bag was half empty. That was all I had, all I was worth. 24 years of life reduced to a half-full trash bag. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to pretend this was not happening, trying to pretend that my mother was not doing this to me. "Mom, please, can't we talk about this? Whatever I did wrong, I can fix it. I'll work more hours, I'll give you everything I earn, I'll do whatever you want." Eleanor just smiled, and it was the cruelest smile I had ever seen. She picked up her car keys from the dresser, the keys to the sedan that used to be my father's car, the car I was never allowed to drive. "Somewhere you've always wanted to be. Independent. Free. Isn't that what you're always whining about, how you wish you could afford your own place, how you wish you had your own life? Well, congratulations. Your wish is being granted." Tiffany giggled, that same giggle she used when she got away with something, when she manipulated Mom into buying her something expensive, when she lied to get me in trouble. "Mom's being generous, really. She could just throw your stuff out on the lawn. At least this way you get a ride." The drive through the dark streets felt endless, eternal, like we were driving through a nightmare that would never end. Eleanor drove her old sedan with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping impatiently against the door, in that way she did when she was annoyed. The radio played some pop song about love and heartbreak, grotesquely cheerful against the suffocating silence in the car. Tiffany sat in the back seat, and I could feel her eyes on me through the rearview mirror, could feel her satisfaction, her triumph, her absolute lack of remorse. When I dared to look, I saw something that might have been regret flicker across her face for just a millisecond, but it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it might have been projecting what I desperately wanted to see. The city looked different at this hour. Empty streets and dark buildings, and the occasional homeless person huddled in a doorway. I had driven these streets 1,000 times with my father back when everything was different, when I still believed the world was fair and families loved each other and mothers protected their children. Now everything looked foreign, threatening, cold. "Mom, where are we going?" I tried again, and I hated how small my voice sounded, how weak, how desperate. "I can stay with a friend, you don't have to do this. Sarah from work has a couch I can sleep on. I'll be out of your way, I promise. I'll never bother you again." Eleanor turned up the radio, drowning out my words, making it clear that nothing I said mattered, that my voice was just noise to be eliminated. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Was she nervous, guilty, or just eager to be done with this unpleasant task so she could go home and sleep peacefully? "You always wanted a fresh start, didn't you?" Eleanor said, finally, her voice cutting through the music. "Always complaining about how hard your life was, how nobody appreciated you, how you did so much and got so little. Well, congratulations. I'm granting your wish, a place where nobody will bother you, a place where you can figure out who you really are without dragging down everyone around you." The car pulled up in front of a building I vaguely recognized. I had driven past it before, had noticed it, without really seeing it the way you notice things you never think will be relevant to your own life. The sign was faded and barely visible in the darkness, the letters worn and chipped, but I could make out the words Beacon House, Women's Support Center. Below that, in smaller letters, Safe Haven for Women in Crisis. My blood ran cold. My stomach dropped. My hands gripped the door handle so hard. My knuckles turned white, and I heard my nails scraping against the plastic. "No," I said, and it came out as a gasp, as a plea, as a denial of reality itself. "This is a shelter. Mom, this is a homeless shelter. You can't be serious. You can't do this to me." "Independence," Eleanor said, and she laughed, that same horrible laugh from my bedroom, that laugh that would haunt my nightmares for months to come. "You preach about it all the time, don't you? How you don't need anyone, how you're going to make it on your own someday, how you're so capable and responsible. Here's your chance, sweetheart. Live your dream. Show me how independent you really are." I grabbed her arm, desperation making me bold, making me forget that touching Eleanor when she did not want to be touched was forbidden, that grabbing her was punishable by days of silent treatment and passive-aggressive comments. "Please, I'm begging you, don't do this. I have nowhere else to go. No money, no friends who can help, nothing. You know I have nothing. You've made sure I have nothing." Eleanor jerked her arm away like I had burned her, like my touch was contaminating. She leaned close, so close I could see the tiny lines around her eyes that her expensive creams could not quite erase, the smudged mascara, the cruelty etched into every feature, every line, every expression. Her face was a mask of disgust. "You have yourself," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear, smelling like red wine and mint gum. "That's all you deserve. That's all you've ever deserved. And by the way, don't come crying back to us. Don't call, don't show up at the house, don't try to contact Tiffany. She needs her sleep. She has college applications to finish. She has a future unlike some people. She has potential. You've had 24 years to amount to something, and you've accomplished exactly nothing. The car locks clicked open with a sharp final snap. Eleanor shoved me out onto the cold sidewalk. The trash bag fell, spilling clothes across the pavement. My father's sweater lay in a puddle. I scrambled to gather everything with trembling hands. I watched frozen as Tiffany rolled down her window. For a second, for one brief moment, I thought she was going to say something, apologize, take it all back, tell Eleanor this was going too far. We had been close once when we were little, before she learned how to play mom against me, before she figured out that her youth and beauty and charm could get her anything she wanted while I got the scraps. She opened her mouth and I held my breath. Instead, she gave me a thumbs up, mocking cruel, her face twisted into a parody of encouragement. Good luck, sis, she called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Try not to get stabbed or anything. I hear these places can be pretty rough. Then the window rolled back up the glass, creating a barrier between us, between the warmth of the car and the cold of the street, between the life I had lost and the life I was being forced into. The car roared away, its taillights disappearing into the night, like red eyes closing, and I stood there alone in the freezing December air. My breath came out in white clouds that dissipated into nothing, and I realized I was crying. The tears felt hot against my frozen cheeks, and they kept coming unstoppable, uncontrollable, until I could not see anything but blurred lights and darkness, and the shape of my own despair. I do not know how long I stood there. It might have been minutes or hours. Time felt broken, shattered like everything else in my life. The street was empty except for the sound of a car alarm somewhere in the distance and the rumble of a truck on the highway. Eventually, the cold became unbearable. My feet were numb, my fingers white and stiff, my whole body shaking. I picked up my trash bag with hands that barely responded to my commands and walked toward the entrance of Beacon House. The door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, older, probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun, and eyes that seemed to see everything, to understand everything, to know exactly what had brought me here at 3 a.m, with all my worldly possessions in a trash bag. She did not say anything at first, just looked at me, taking in the tears, the trash bag, the uniform stained with my day's work, the absolute devastation written across my face. "Come in, child," she finally said, and her voice was soft, gentle, in a way I had forgotten voices could be. In a way Eleanor's voice had never been, not even when I was small and sick and scared. She placed a warm hand on my shoulder, and the kindness of that simple touch almost broke me completely, almost sent me to my knees on that doorstep. "You're safe now." I stepped into the warmth, into the smell of coffee and something baking cinnamon, maybe into a space filled with sleeping women on cots, who probably all had stories like mine, who had all been broken by someone who was supposed to love them. The woman who introduced herself as Linda led me to an empty cot in the corner and handed me a blanket that smelled like lavender detergent, like someone had cared enough to make it nice. "Rest," Linda said, smoothing the blanket over me like I was a child. "We'll talk in the morning. Right now you just need to be warm and safe." But I could not rest. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the breathing of strangers, to the sound of someone crying quietly in their sleep, to the hum of the old heating system working overtime, and something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped, and in their place, something cold and hard began to grow. Anger. Pure crystalline anger that felt like clarity, like purpose, like the first real emotion I had allowed myself to feel in years. They had thrown me away, treated me like garbage, used me for years, taking my paychecks, my labor, my unconditional love, my willingness to sacrifice everything for people who did not give a damn about me, and then discarded me when I was no longer convenient, when I was no longer useful, when I stopped being profitable. Eleanor had stolen my inheritance, my father's legacy, everything that should have been mine, and then had the audacity to make me grateful for a storage closet and hand-me-down clothes and the privilege of working myself to exhaustion while she lived off money that rightfully belonged to me. I would not let this destroy me. I would not give them that satisfaction. I would not prove them right. The next morning, Linda made me breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast, simple and warm, served on a real plate with a real fork, not the paper plates Eleanor made me use at home because she did not trust me not to break her good dishes. The eggs were fluffy and seasoned with pepper, and there was butter on the toast and orange juice in a plastic cup. It was the first meal someone had made for me in years that did not come with strings attached, that did not come with the expectation that I would repay it somehow, that I would owe something. "Eat slowly," Linda said, sitting across from me at the communal table. "Your stomach might not be used to real food if you've been skipping meals." I had been skipping meals. Constantly. Eleanor controlled the food budget, and most of it went to organic produce and expensive cuts of meat for her and Tiffany. I got the leftovers if there were any, or I bought dollar menu items from fast food places with the few dollars I managed to hide from Eleanor's notice. I ate every bite of Linda's breakfast, even though it tasted like ash in my mouth, even though each swallow felt like choking because I knew I needed strength for what was coming. I did not know what yet, but I knew something was coming. Linda did not ask questions, did not pry into my story, did not demand explanations for why I was there. She just handed me a list of job openings and a directory of resources. "The Rusty Spoon is hiring dishwashers," she said, pointing to one listing. "I know the owner, Carla. She's tough but fair. Tell her Linda sent you." I looked at the paper with steady hands. "I already work there," I said. "As a server. I can ask about the dishwashing position. More hours means more money." Linda nodded approvingly, and I saw respect in her eyes. "Good. Keep busy, keep moving forward. Don't let them win." Who was them, I wondered. Eleanor, everyone who had ever hurt someone and thrown them away, the world in general, it did not matter. I would not let any of them win. 2 weeks passed in a blur of scalding water and dirty dishes and hands that became raw and covered in tiny cuts and burns. I worked the breakfast shift as a server, then immediately moved to the back to wash dishes through lunch and dinner. Carla, true to Linda's word, was tough. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair. She dyed an unnatural shade of red and tattoos covering both arms and a voice that could cut through the chaos of a busy kitchen. She did not care about my sob story, did not offer sympathy, did not treat me like a victim. She just told me to clock in at 6 and not to show weakness. "Everyone's got a story," Carla said one day, tossing me a new pair of rubber gloves when mine had split at the seams. "Question is, you gonna let it bury you, or you gonna dig yourself out? Because I don't have time for people who wanna wallow. You wallow on your own time." I was digging. Every night I returned to Beacon House and lay on that cot staring at the cracked ceiling with its water stains that looked like maps of countries I would never visit, planning. I did not know what yet, but I knew I needed information. I needed leverage. I needed to understand exactly what Eleanor had done with my father's estate, with the business, with everything. I needed to know where the money had gone, why there was never enough for my education, but always enough for Tiffany's designer clothes and Eleanor's spa days and the renovations to the house that was supposed to be my inheritance. 2. I started researching during my breaks at work using the free Wi-Fi to look up public records. My father's business had been sold for $300,000. That was a matter of public record. The Harrington Family Foundation had been established shortly after, also public record. Eleanor was listed as the director and primary decision-maker. The foundation claimed to support various charitable causes, primarily women's shelters and domestic violence prevention programs. Noble causes. Admirable causes. Causes that made Eleanor look like a saint. But where was my college fund? Where was the money my father had promised me? Where was my inheritance? Then Carla handed me a newspaper. It was a local publication, nothing fancy, and she threw it down on the counter where I was washing glasses, the water splashing up and soaking the pages. "Your people," she said, her voice dripping with disdain and something else. Disgust, maybe. Or recognition of something she had seen before, something she hated. I picked up the paper with wet hands, leaving damp fingerprints on the pages that smudged the ink. The headline was large, accompanied by a color photo that made my stomach turn, that made my hands grip the paper so hard it started to tear. "The Harrington family receives Philanthropist of the Year award for major donation to women's support centers." There they were. Eleanor and Tiffany dressed in elegant gowns, Eleanor in deep purple silk that probably cost more than I made in a month, Tiffany in silver that made her look like a princess, a fairy tale princess from a story where the stepmother and stepsister were the heroines. They were holding a crystal trophy, smiling for the cameras, looking radiant, successful, generous. The article gushed about their charitable work, their dedication to helping less fortunate women find their footing, their commitment to making the world a better place. There was a quote from Tiffany in a highlighted box: "We believe every woman deserves a second chance. Our mission is to help those who are struggling find their place in society. We've been so blessed in our lives, and we believe it's our responsibility to give back to those who haven't had the same opportunities." I read it 3 times. Then I found Eleanor's quote at the end of the article: "We give out of the abundance of our hearts because we know how hard life can be for women who don't have support systems. These women need help, and we're honored to provide it." The Harrington Family Foundation has donated over $50,000 this year alone to local women's shelters, and we plan to double that next year. My hands gripped the newspaper so hard it tore down the middle. The paper cut my finger, a thin line of blood appearing bright red against my skin, but I barely felt it. They were using my suffering. They were using the shelter where they had abandoned me as a prop for their public image. They were profiting socially, if not financially, from my homelessness, from my poverty, from the fact that they had thrown me away like garbage. The women at Beacon House, women like me who had been thrown away and forgotten, who had been abused and abandoned, and left with nothing, we were their charity project. Their ticket to respectability and awards and admiration from people who did not know the truth. And that $50,000 they claimed to have donated, I knew for a fact that Beacon House was struggling. Linda had mentioned just last week that they might have to cut back on meals because their funding had been reduced. Where was that money? Where was it really going? Something clicked in my mind. A plan began to form, cold and precise and ruthless. I carefully folded the newspaper and tucked it into my bag, the bag that used to be a trash bag, but was now just my bag, the only bag I had. That night, I asked Linda about the upcoming Charity Appreciation Gala that was mentioned in the article. I kept my voice casual, curious, like I was just making conversation. "Oh yes," Linda said, her face brightening in a way that made me feel guilty for what I was about to do. "It's a big event. All the major donors will be there. The Harrington family is the guest of honor this year. They've been so generous to us. Well, not to us specifically, but to women's shelters in general. We applied for one of their grants months ago, but haven't heard back yet." Of course they had not heard back, because the money was not going where it was supposed to go. I would bet my life on it. Could I attend? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, swallowing the anger that threatened to rise up and choke me. Maybe as a volunteer, I'd like to thank the donors personally. I mean, I'm here because of people like them, right? I want to give back. Linda looked at me with such pride it made me feel guilty for a moment for using her kindness for manipulating her trust. But only a moment. "That's wonderful, Mia," she said, using the fake name I had given when I arrived. The name I had chosen randomly because I could not bear to hear my real name spoken in that place, could not bear the constant reminder of who I used to be. "I'll see what I can arrange. You have such a generous spirit. You're going to do great things. I can feel it." Generous. The word tasted bitter, tasted like ash, tasted like revenge. Over the next few weeks, I worked obsessively. During the day, I washed dishes until my hands bled, until the skin cracked and peeled, and Carla had to force me to wear gloves because I was getting blood on the plates. At night, I researched. I used the library computers to dig into public records, tax filings, financial disclosures. I learned more about nonprofit organizations and charitable foundations than I ever wanted to know. I contacted a private investigator named Marcus, someone Linda had mentioned once, who did pro bono work for women in difficult situations, who had helped track down abusive ex-husbands and recovered stolen documents and gathered the evidence for court cases. I told him I needed information about a family trust, about charity organizations, about financial records. I gave him what little money I had managed to save, money I had been setting aside for a security deposit on an apartment someday, money that was now more valuable as ammunition. Marcus was young, maybe 30, with a shaved head and multiple piercings and a cynical smile that said he had seen the worst of humanity and was no longer surprised by it. He did not ask too many questions when I slipped him, the documents I had managed to copy before Eleanor threw me out, old papers from my father's office that I had hidden in my mattress years ago, for no reason I could articulate at the time, just a vague sense that I might need them someday. Just in case. Just in case of what I had not known then. Now I did. "This is interesting," Marcus said one day, meeting me at a coffee shop, far from Beacon House, far from the Rusty Spoon, far from anywhere Eleanor might see us. He spread papers across the table between us, careful to keep his voice low. "The Harrington Family Foundation. They receive significant donations from various sources, wealthy individuals, corporations looking for tax write-offs, people who want to feel good about themselves. And they claim to redistribute those donations to charities like Beacon House and others. But look at these bank statements." I looked. The numbers swam before my eyes, rose in columns of figures that meant nothing to me at first. But Marcus pointed out the key details with a pen circling, underlining, making it clear. Large sums came in hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. But only a tiny fraction went out to actual charitable causes. Maybe 10%, maybe less. The rest seemed to disappear into various accounts, some offshore, some under shell companies with vague names like Tiffany Enterprises and Eleanor Holdings. "They're skimming," Marcus said flatly, stating it like a fact, like something he had seen 100 times before. "They're using the foundation to funnel money. It's embezzlement, money laundering. And they're using the good reputation of places like Beacon House as cover, as a shield." People see them donate a few thousand here and there and assume the foundation is legitimate. Meanwhile, they're pocketing hundreds of thousands. My father's money, my inheritance. All of it had gone into this foundation, and Eleanor had been systematically stealing it, siphoning it off, using the veneer of charity to hide her theft. She had been doing it for years, right under everyone's nose, and nobody had questioned her because she was so good at playing the grieving widow, the devoted mother, the generous philanthropist. "Can you prove it?" I asked, and my voice was steady, cold, clinical. I did not sound like myself. I sounded like someone else, someone harder, someone capable of things I had never imagined. Marcus gathered the papers, carefully sliding them into a folder. "With more time, yes, but you'll need someone with authority to investigate. A journalist, maybe, or the authorities themselves. I can give you evidence, but I can't force anyone to act on it." I thought of David Chen, a young investigative journalist whose articles I had been reading online, articles that exposed corrupt politicians and fraudulent businesses, and people who used their power to hurt others. He had a reputation for taking down corrupt organizations, for not being afraid of powerful people, for caring more about the truth than about making friends. I found his email address on the newspaper's website and sent him an anonymous message with just enough information to pique his interest. A breadcrumb trail. "Look into the Harrington Family Foundation," I wrote. "They're not what they seem. The public filings don't match the bank records. Someone should ask where the money is really going." I did not expect a response. I did not expect him to take me seriously. But 3 days later, I got a reply. "Who is this?" he wrote. "How do you know this information? Can we meet?" I wrote back carefully, creating a secure email account covering my tracks. "I can't reveal my identity yet, but I can provide documentation. Are you interested?" He was interested. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with David 3 times, each meeting in a different location, each time bringing more evidence. Marcus had been thorough. We had bank statements, tax returns, internal memos that I had found in my father's old office files, emails that Eleanor had never bothered to delete because she never imagined anyone would look for them. David was relentless. He asked questions, verified sources, followed up on every detail. He was maybe 28, with messy black hair and glasses and coffee stains on his shirt, and an intensity that reminded me of myself, of what I had become. He believed in justice. He believed in exposing lies. He believed that powerful people should be held accountable. "This is big," he said at our third meeting, spreading the evidence across a table at a dim sum restaurant in Chinatown where Eleanor would never go, where I felt safe. "This could ruin them. Are you sure you want to do this? There will be consequences." I'm sure, I said, and I was. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. But I needed one more thing. I needed to be there when it happened. I needed to see their faces. The Charity Appreciation Gala took place in the ballroom of the city's fanciest hotel, the Grand Marquis, a place I had only ever seen from the outside, a place I had once dreamed of visiting for my wedding someday, back when I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I arrived as part of the catering staff, having convinced the catering company that I had experience serving at high-end events. They were desperate for workers and did not ask many questions. They just handed me a uniform, black pants and a white shirt and a bow tie that choked me, and told me to smile and be invisible. The ballroom was obscene in its opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, each one probably worth more than I would make in a year, more than most of the women at Beacon House would make in a lifetime. The floor was polished marble that reflected the lights like water, like ice, slippery and cold and unforgiving, white tablecloths and gold-rimmed plates and flowers that had been flown in from somewhere exotic and expensive. And there, in the center of it all, standing on a small stage, stood Eleanor and Tiffany. Eleanor wore a deep purple gown that hugged her figure, that made her look elegant and powerful and untouchable. Her hair was perfectly styled in an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless, her jewelry understated but clearly expensive. Real diamonds, real pearls, real gold. She was laughing, holding court with a group of wealthy donors, her voice carrying across the room that cultivated laugh, that sounded like wind chimes, like money, like power. "We simply must do more for those poor women," she was saying, one hand on her chest in a gesture of false sincerity. "They have nothing, absolutely nothing, and we have been so blessed. It's our duty, our moral obligation to help them. That's what separates us from them, isn't it? Our willingness to give back." I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk up to her and tell everyone in that room exactly who she was, exactly what she had done, but I did not. I circulated with a tray of champagne glasses, keeping my head down, invisible, the way servers always are to rich people, the way I had been invisible to Eleanor for years. Tiffany stood beside Eleanor in that silver dress that shimmered when she moved, catching the light, making her look like something out of a movie. She looked like a princess, untouchable and perfect, like someone who had never done anything wrong in her entire life. They both did. They looked like exactly the kind of people you would trust with your money, with your causes, with your goodwill. I passed close to Eleanor several times, close enough to hear her conversations, to smell that expensive perfume, to see the fake smile plastered on her face. Each time she looked right through me. She did not recognize her own daughter. Or maybe she did and simply did not care, did not acknowledge my existence, because acknowledging me would ruin her perfect evening. But Tiffany recognized me. I saw the exact moment when her eyes landed on my face and widened in shock, in horror, in fear. She gripped Eleanor's arm, whispered something urgently, her face pale under her makeup. "Mom," she hissed loud enough for me to hear as I passed. "I think I see. It can't be." Eleanor followed Tiffany's gaze, and for one brief second our eyes met. I saw confusion flicker across her face, then recognition, then something else. Dismissal. She looked away, turning back to her conversation like I was nothing, like I did not exist, like I was just another server in a long line of interchangeable people whose only purpose was to serve her. "You're imagining things," Eleanor said to Tiffany, patting her arm. "Just some server. They all look the same in those uniforms. Now smile, we're about to get our award. They all look the same." That is what she thought of me, of all of us. We were all the same. Interchangeable, forgettable, worthless. The award ceremony began. A man in an expensive suit gave a speech about the importance of philanthropy, about how the Harrington family represented the best of what humanity could be, about how their generosity had touched countless lives. Eleanor and Tiffany walked up to receive their crystal trophy, and the audience applauded, standing ovation, everyone eager to show their approval to be associated with such wonderful people. Eleanor gave a speech. She thanked everyone for their support, talked about how humbled she was, how grateful, how committed to continuing this important work. She mentioned Beacon House by name, talked about how heartbreaking it was to see women with nowhere to go, how grateful she was that the Harrington Family Foundation could help provide them with shelter and hope. "These women are the invisible members of our community," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "They have been forgotten, abandoned, cast aside. But they matter. They deserve dignity. They deserve a chance. And the Harrington Family Foundation will always be there to give them that chance." The applause was deafening. Tiffany spoke next, and she was even better than Eleanor, more convincing, more sincere sounding. "I've learned so much from my mother about the importance of giving back," she said, looking at Eleanor with adoration, with love, with respect. "She taught me that we have a responsibility to use our blessings to help others. Every time I meet someone who has been helped by our foundation, I'm reminded of why this work matters. These women deserve second chances. They deserve to know that someone cares about them." I stood in the back of the room holding an empty tray, watching this performance, this elaborate lie, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no betrayal. Just cold, clear focus. During my break, I slipped away to the coat room, to a quiet space where I would not be disturbed. I had prepared 2 envelopes. The first was thick with copies of the documents Marcus had given me. Bank statements, transfer records, discrepancies in the foundation's public filings versus their actual expenditures, evidence of shell companies and offshore accounts. I slipped it into the registration book, knowing it would be collected later, along with the other materials for the foundation's records, knowing someone would eventually find it. But I had also prepared a second envelope, and this one was more important. This one I left in the media room, where journalists were gathering information for their coverage of the event where David Chen was supposed to be waiting. I had told him to look for it, to expect it. I addressed it simply, for immediate investigation. Inside was everything. Not just the financial documents, but the full story. Copies of my father's will showing that he had never intended for Eleanor to have sole control of everything. Copies of the business sale records showing that Eleanor had sold my father's company for far less than it was worth to a buyer who happened to be her cousin. Copies of correspondence showing that the Harrington Family Foundation had received hundreds of thousands in donations, but had distributed less than 10% to actual charities. And a letter written in my own hand explaining exactly what Eleanor had done, how she had stolen my inheritance, how she had thrown me into the streets, how she had abandoned me at the very shelter she claimed to support. I signed it with my real name. Scarlett Harrington, not Mia, not the scared girl who had arrived at Beacon House with nothing. Scarlett, my father's daughter. The daughter Eleanor had tried to erase. I went back to serving champagne and I watched Eleanor and Tiffany circulate among their admirers, accepting congratulations, posing for photos, basking in their moment of glory. I watched and I waited and I knew that everything was about to change. I left before the event ended, slipping out into the cold night air, taking the bus back to Beacon House. I did not sleep that night. I lay on my cot staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning, waiting for everything to begin. The story broke 3 days later. The headline screamed across the front page of the city newspaper: Philanthropist family under investigation for charity fraud and money laundering. David Chen had done his job beautifully, masterfully, perfectly. He had taken the information I provided and dug deeper, connecting dots, interviewing sources, uncovering years of systematic theft. He had contacted the foundation's other donors, who were shocked to learn where their money had really gone. He had spoken to Beacon House and other charities who confirmed they had received far less than the foundation claimed to have donated. He had consulted with financial experts who explained exactly how Eleanor had used shell companies and offshore accounts to hide her embezzlement. The Harrington Family Foundation was a sham. Eleanor had been using it to siphon money from my father's estate and from legitimate donors, keeping most of it for herself, while donating just enough to maintain appearances to keep up the lie to protect her reputation. The article detailed everything, every transaction, every lie, every manipulation. There were quotes from financial experts calling it one of the most elaborate charity frauds in the state's history. There were quotes from donors who felt betrayed. There were quotes from Linda at Beacon House, who said she had applied for a grant from the foundation months ago and had been told the funds had already been allocated, when in reality, the money was sitting in Eleanor's personal accounts. And there in the center of the article was a photo of me, not from the gala, but an old photo one. I had provided to David a photo of me with my father taken a month before he died. We were smiling, his arm around my shoulders, both of us happy. The caption read, "Scarlett Harrington, daughter of the late James Harrington, claims she was systematically defrauded by her mother and abandoned at a homeless shelter, while her family claimed to be supporting women in crisis." My phone rang that morning, an unknown number flashing on the screen of the cheap prepaid cell phone I had bought with my dishwashing money. I let it ring twice, 3 times, savoring the moment before answering. "You did this." Eleanor's voice was shaking, raw with rage and fear and something else. Desperation. The same desperation I had felt standing on that sidewalk in the freezing cold. "You destroyed everything. Everything I built. Everything we had. You ruined us." "I did nothing," I said, calmly sitting on my cot at Beacon House, the newspaper spread before me, my name in print, my story told. "You destroyed yourself. I just let the truth check in. I just made sure people knew who you really were." "You think you're better than us," Eleanor hissed, her voice rising, cracking. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. You're just a bitter, jealous little girl who couldn't handle the fact that Tiffany was more successful, more beautiful, more loved. You've always been jealous of her." Maybe I agreed, keeping my voice level, refusing to rise to the bait. "But I'm free. And you know what? I learned that from you, Mom. You always said I needed to be independent, that I couldn't survive without you, that I would fail on my own. Turns out you were wrong. I'm surviving just fine. Better than fine. But how are you doing? Looks like you're the one who can't survive without me, without my silence, without my compliance. How does it feel to have everything taken away?" Eleanor's breathing was ragged on the other end of the line. I heard her trying to compose herself, trying to find the right words, the right threat, the right manipulation. "This isn't over. We'll fight this. We have lawyers. Good lawyers. We'll prove you're lying. We'll show everyone what kind of person you really are." "Good luck with that," I said, and I meant it. Let them try. Let them hire all the lawyers they wanted. The evidence was solid. The truth was undeniable. Enjoy your independence, Eleanor. Enjoy knowing what it feels like to have nothing. Enjoy being the charity case for once. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From relief, from something that felt almost like joy, from the weight of years of oppression finally lifting off my shoulders. Linda found me later that day. She was holding the newspaper, her expression unreadable, complex, a mixture of shock and understanding, and something that might have been pride. "Did you know about this?" she asked quietly, sitting down beside me on the cot. I met her eyes. I owed her the truth. "They put me here," I said simply. "Eleanor is my mother. Was my mother. She threw me away like garbage, drove me here in the middle of the night, and abandoned me. And then she used this place, used all of you as props for her image while stealing from the very people she claimed to help. I just made sure the truth came out." Linda was silent for a long moment, processing, thinking, deciding how to respond. Then she reached over and took my hand, squeezed it gently. "I'm not going to ask how you did it," she said finally. "But I am going to tell you that you didn't need to risk yourself for us. You could have just walked away, built your own life, left them behind." "No, I couldn't," I said, and I realized it was true. Because if I didn't do something, I would have stayed a victim forever. I would have let them define me. I would have let them win. Linda nodded slowly. "Then I'm proud of you. And your father would be proud of you too." The investigation moved quickly. The authorities froze the foundation's assets pending a full audit. Eleanor and Tiffany were all over the news, but now, instead of glowing profiles and awards, it was mugshots and court appearances and lawyers making statements about presumption of innocence. Their mansion was seized as evidence of ill-gotten gains. Their cars, their jewelry, their designer clothes, everything. All of it taken away, investigated, cataloged, used as evidence of their fraud. Social media exploded. People who had donated to the foundation felt betrayed and demanded their money back. Other charities that had been listed as recipients came forward to confirm they had received far less than the foundation claimed. Women from Beacon House and other shelters were interviewed sharing their stories of struggle, making it clear how desperately they needed genuine support, how much damage people like Eleanor did by using their suffering for personal gain. Tiffany tried to claim she did not know that Eleanor had controlled everything, that she was just a naive daughter who trusted her mother. But the evidence showed otherwise. Her name was on bank accounts. She had signed documents. She had benefited directly from the stolen money. She was complicit. I felt nothing watching it happen. No triumph, no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Just a calm, quiet peace, like a storm finally passing, like the sun coming out after days of rain. Months passed. I saved enough money from the Rusty Spoon to rent a tiny room above an old bookstore called the Dusty Pages. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Peterson, was looking for a responsible tenant and did not ask too many questions when I showed up with references from Linda and Carla. It was not much, this room. The walls were peeling, exposing old floral wallpaper underneath. The sink leaked constantly, a slow drip that kept me awake at night until I got used to it. I could hear every sound from the street below, every car, every argument, every laugh. But it was mine, my own light switch that I controlled, my own key that opened my own door. My own space where nobody could throw me out, where nobody could tell me I did not belong, where nobody could make me feel worthless. I bought a small table and a chair from a thrift store, a lamp that flickered sometimes but gave enough light to read by, a coffee maker that only worked if you held the button down the whole time but made decent coffee. I hung curtains that did not quite match. I put the photo of my father on the windowsill where I could see it every morning. Slowly, carefully, I built a life. Beacon House received a new grant from a legitimate foundation, one that actually cared about helping women, one that had been inspired by the media coverage to step in and fill the void left by the Harrington Foundation's collapse. The grant was substantial enough to expand their services to hire more staff to help more women. Linda offered me a part-time job helping new arrivals find housing and employment. "You understand what they're going through," she said, offering me the position in her small office that smelled like coffee and hope. "You can help them better than anyone. You know what it's like to have nothing and to build something from that nothing. You know what it's like to survive." I took the job. I worked mornings at Beacon House and evenings at the Rusty Spoon, and somehow I managed to also take 2 classes at the community college, business administration and accounting, because I wanted to understand money, wanted to understand how people like Eleanor manipulated systems, wanted to make sure I could never be fooled again. The first woman I helped at Beacon House was younger than me, maybe 21, with tired eyes and a baby who would not stop crying, and a story that was probably worse than mine. She whispered that her mother had kicked her out when she got pregnant, that she had nowhere to go, that she was scared and alone and did not know how to take care of a baby by herself. "You're going to be okay," I told her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I took her to the room where supplies were kept, showed her where the formula and diapers were, helped her make a bottle for the baby. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you will be. One day at a time, 1 hour at a time if you have to. Just keep moving forward." I saw her shoulders relax slightly, saw a tiny spark of hope flicker in her eyes, saw her hold her baby a little closer. That spark was worth everything. 3 months after the article broke on a cold Tuesday evening, just as I was about to close up at the Rusty Spoon, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up from wiping down tables, my back aching from 8 hours of serving food and washing dishes, my mind already on the homework I needed to finish before tomorrow's class. Eleanor and Tiffany stood in the doorway, and they looked like ghosts, like shadows of themselves, like people I used to know in another life. Eleanor's expensive perfume was gone, replaced by the smell of cheap laundry detergent and something stale, something defeated. Her hair was gray at the roots, hastily dyed to cover it, but not well enough. Her clothes were from department stores, not boutiques. Tiffany's silver dress was a distant memory. Now she wore a faded sweater with a stain on the sleeve and jeans that did not quite fit right, jeans that had probably come from a thrift store. They walked toward me slowly, uncertainly, like they were not sure they were allowed to be there, like they expected me to throw them out. I saw Eleanor try to arrange her face into a smile, try to summon some of that old charm, that old power. It did not work. The smile fell apart before it fully formed. Scarlet, Eleanor said, and the name sounded foreign in her mouth, like she was speaking a language she had forgotten, like she was trying to remember how to be human. You look so healthy. You look good. I set down the coffee pot I had been holding and turned to face them fully. Behind me, I heard Carla come out of the kitchen, heard her footsteps stop, heard her presence like a shield at my back, ready to intervene if needed, ready to defend me if they tried anything. But I did not need defending. Not anymore. "What do you want?" I asked, and my voice was steady, calm, empty of emotion. I felt nothing looking at them. No anger, no hatred, no satisfaction. Just nothing. Tiffany's voice cracked when she spoke, and I saw tears in her eyes, though I did not know if they were real or manufactured. "We're staying at a motel on the edge of town. The Super 8. It's terrible. There are roaches, and the heating doesn't work, and we can barely afford it. Mom's not doing well, and we thought maybe you could help us. Just a little bit. Just enough to get back on our feet." Eleanor looked down at the table at the empty coffee cup sitting there at the scratched laminate surface that was nothing like the marble countertop she used to have. "Do you work here?" she asked, and there was something desperate in her voice, something broken. "I mean, you must make decent money. Maybe you could lend us some, or help us find jobs. You know people now, right? You could put in a good word for us somewhere." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table between us, and I kept my voice very calm, very steady, very clear. "You're asking me for help. The night you dropped me at Beacon House, you told me I had myself and that was all I deserved. You told me I was nothing. You told me I was worthless. You told me I was a burden. Do you remember that?" Eleanor opened her mouth, closed, it opened it again. I was angry. I didn't mean it. You know how things get when emotions run high. We're family. Families help each other. "Family," I repeated, tasting the word, finding it bitter. "You threw away that claim when you drove me to a homeless shelter and abandoned me in the middle of the night. You threw it away when you stole my inheritance and used it to fund your lifestyle. You threw it away when you built your reputation on the suffering of women you claim to care about while treating your own daughter like garbage." "Please," Tiffany whispered, and tears streamed down her face, though I still could not tell if they were real. "We have nothing, nowhere to go. You know what that feels like. You've been where we are. How can you just turn your back on us?" "Easily," I said, and I realized it was true. It was so easy. Because I learned from the best. You taught me how to turn my back on someone who needs help. You taught me how to prioritize my own comfort over someone else's survival. You taught me that some people don't deserve kindness. I reached for 2 empty coffee cups from behind the counter and set them down on the table between us with a soft clink. "Coffee is free. That's the last free thing you'll ever get from me. That's more than you gave me." Eleanor looked up at me, and I saw rage flickering in her eyes, humiliation burning her cheeks, red hatred twisting her features. But underneath it all, I saw something else. Recognition. Fear. The realization that I was not the same girl she had thrown away, that I had become someone she could not control, could not manipulate, could not break. She finally saw me, really saw me, and realized that I was stronger than she had ever been, stronger than she would ever be. "You're just like him," Eleanor spat venom in her voice. "Just like your father. Self-righteous. Judgmental. Thinking you're better than everyone else." "If being like my father means having integrity," I said quietly, "then I'll take that as a compliment." They left without drinking the coffee. I watched them walk out into the evening, shoulders hunched against the cold, moving slowly like old people, like defeated people, like people who had finally reaped what they sowed. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner, and I felt nothing. No victory, no revenge, no satisfaction. Just completion. The anger I had carried for so long simply evaporated, leaving behind only cool, clear peace. Carla came up beside me, put a hand on my shoulder. "You good?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and I realized I meant it. "I'm good." I did not hate them anymore. I did not love them either. They were just people who had once had power over me and now did not. That was all. They could not hurt me anymore. They could not touch me. I was free. That night, I walked past Beacon House on my way home to my little room above the bookstore. The lights were warm in the windows, and I could see women moving around inside, making dinner, talking, laughing, existing in that temporary sanctuary. A young girl stood outside shivering, clutching a duffel bag, afraid to knock, afraid to admit she needed help. I recognized that fear. I had lived that fear. I opened the door for her just like Linda had done for me all those months ago. "Come in," I said softly, gently, the way someone had spoken to me when I needed it most. "You're safe now." She looked at me with eyes full of tears and fear and desperate hope, and then stepped inside into the warmth. I followed her in holding the door open, making sure she knew she was welcome, that she belonged, that someone cared. And as the door closed behind us, I looked back at the dark street I had come from, at the cold night that represented everything I had survived. They had thrown me away to destroy me. They had tried to break me to prove I was nothing without them, to confirm that I was worthless, that I would fail, that I would come crawling back begging for scraps. But all they had done was set me free. All they had done was push me toward the first place that ever really saw my value, that ever treated me like I mattered, that ever gave me the space to become who I was meant to be. All they had done was force me to build my own home on my own terms, with my own hands, with my own strength. And that home was stronger than anything they could ever take away. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do to you becomes the greatest gift you never knew you needed. Sometimes being thrown away is just another word for being set free. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever had to rebuild your entire life from nothing? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of survival and strength. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they can overcome anything. Thank you for listening to my story.